Thank you, James, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ed Green, as James said, and I head up the SME procurement programme in Cabinet Office. And I'd like to start by thanking James and the organisers today for allowing me to present to you. As some of you may know, government has an aspiration that 25% of its procurement spend should go to SMEs directly and in the supply chain by 2015, by the end of the Parliament. And it's that I want to talk to you about today. So I'll start by telling you a little bit where the aspiration came from, then give you a little bit of programme overview and our mission statement. I'll then look at achievements to date and progress. Then I'll focus in on a couple of our initiatives that I think merit to mention, and those are our Contracts Finder website and our Mystery Shopper service. And then before handing on to James, I'm going to talk about what we're doing to work with prime contractors to increase the amount of SME spend in the supply chain. Next slide. So, as you can see, this aspiration has traction with ministers. It was included in the coalition agreement and reiterated again in the midterm review. It's worth probably just taking time to think about what the aspiration is. It's 25% of spend by value directly and in the supply chain. It's not simply number of contracts. And if you think about that, that could be quite easy to achieve. You could have 99 tiny contracts and one huge one and claim that you had 99% of contracts with SMEs. So we really want to see spend increase, and that's why the aspiration is around spend rather than value. Next slide. So this next slide is just really our mission statement about getting value from SME suppliers, and it's just important to say that this isn't just about counting our spend better. A key success criterion is that things really do feel different for SMEs, and that our procurement practices, which have been quite outdated and complex in the past, are reformed to open them up to as broad a range of suppliers as possible. And if you think about it, why would we not want that? Previously procurement's been quite complex, it's been quite bureaucratic. In some instances, it's meant that only a very few companies can actually afford to bid for and supply government contracts. Whereas if you open up your procurement opportunities to the widest range of suppliers possible, it stands to reason that that will drive healthier competition, better value for money, and more flexible and innovative solutions, which are so often offered by the SME sector. Next slide. I think it's important just to show you what this isn't about. Obviously, we've got an aspiration, and because that exists and has such a degree of ministerial interest, there's the potential for it either to be misunderstood or to drive slightly perverse behaviours. So it's not about favouring SMEs over other sorts of suppliers. It's not a handout. It's not a quota. It is, as I say, opening up procurement, making it less complex, making our procurement opportunities more visible so that SMEs can gear up to deliver them. And by doing those things, we think that we think that we can achieve the 25%. So we're not skewing markets, and indeed, overwhelmingly SMEs tell us that's not what they want. They just want to be able to have a chance of pitching in to deliver. Next. So this slide gives you a picture really of some of our achievements to date, some of the initiatives we've introduced. So we've got a Crown representative for SMEs who makes sure that the voice of SMEs is heard, right at the top table. We've simplified and streamlined public procurement. We've eliminated pre-qualification questionnaires, which are the separate selection stage that can be so often a problem for SME suppliers. We've eliminated those in central government for contracts below £100,000, which is where the EU rules kick in, and where we need to use them above threshold. We've introduced a core streamlined pre-qualification questionnaire, which is a lot simpler, a lot fewer questions, a lot fewer hurdles and barriers to entry. We have an SME panel, which either Francis Maud, Chloe Smith, our two ministers, or both will attend, and this is about 25 SMEs who really hold our feet to the fire. They feedback on what we're doing and what more we need to be doing, and it's just another chance for SMEs themselves to challenge us on our ambition and on the programme, and whether or not we're moving in the right direction. Two things that I'm going to focus on in a slide or two's time are our contracts finder, which is where all government opportunities over £10,000 can be found, and our mystery shopper service, which enables all suppliers, but it's a particular benefit to SMEs, I think, to complain where they encounter instances of poor procurement practice. Next. So where are we? This slide sets out where we are against the aspiration as at the end of 2011-12. We're currently validating the figures for the last financial year, and we'll be publishing those shortly when we publish a 2-year on report into the programme. 2 years on being from the launch really in 2011, where the Prime Minister and Francis Maude launched many of these initiatives. You can see from the slide, it's probably a little bit difficult to see, but overall, in terms of direct spend, so spend directly with SMEs, at the end of 2011-12, we were at 10%, which is an increase from where we were in 2009-10, when direct spend was at 6.5%. In addition to that, we surveyed some of our top prime contractors to see how SMEs were faring in the supply chain. We only surveyed a sample of spend, but SMEs benefiting from a further 6% of business in the supply chain. Data is an area we struggled with at first, and it's an area we're still working to improve to make sure we've got a really accurate picture of how we're progressing. I did say that it's not just about counting, and indeed that's right, but obviously we do need to count our aspiration, to see if we are achieving the 25% or not, and where we are against that. Next. So I said I'd come back to Contracts Finder, and this slide tells you a little bit more about it. It's a portal where all live opportunities over £10,000 in central government can be found. It's free to access. You can sign up for email alerts. You can search on there and find all government opportunities. It's not just about opportunities though. It starts earlier than that. So in 2011 we started publishing Procurement Pipelines, which are about what government's probably going to be buying in future years, because one of the signals we got from the market was that suppliers needed time to gear up to deliver. And if they saw a potential procurement was the advert, then that was really too late for them to be able to gear up meaningfully to bid. So we took that feedback on board, and now we've got pipelines on there from 18 sectors covering around £79 billion of spend. As well as pipelines and opportunities, Contracts Finder meets some of our transparency requirements, so you can actually find our published contracts on there and procurement documentation. So it really is the go-to place to find out what government's bought in the past, what it's thinking of buying, and what currently is being advertised. Next. And I said also that I'd come back to Mystery Shopper. So Mystery Shopper, as I said, is something that allows SMEs to complain about poor procurement practice, whether that's a particularly complex pre-qualification questionnaire, whether it's a poorly spec'd requirement, whether it's an issue they're facing in the supply chain. It does extend to supply chains. They can raise complaints. It also covers issues of late payment. You might be aware that central government's policy since 2010 has been to pay undisputed invoices within 5 days and require prime contractors to pay subcontractors within 30 days. So if there's an issue of late payment, Mystery Shopper can look into that as well. It's got a few benefits. It's an informal service, so if legal action's contemplated, then Mystery Shopper doesn't get involved. It'll treat the complainant anonymously, so when we investigate with the contracting authority, we won't name the complainant if that's what the complainant wants. And we do publish our results, and again, we don't name the complainant, but we do name the contracting authority, the public body, if you like, complained against, and the action that the public body agreed to take in response to our recommendations. The stats on that slide are a little bit out of date now. As of the end of May, we'd had 336 closed cases, and 80% of those resulted in a positive outcome. I think that's quite impressive because it doesn't have formal powers, as I said. It is an informal service. And it's important to say it doesn't advocate for the complainant as such. What it does is it's about fixing processes. It's about making sure that people are paid on time. So a result for us is a poor procurement practice being changed. It's not that our complainant goes on to benefit from a contract. That's obviously not the point of the service, and indeed, you know, that would start to get into difficulties in terms of breaching EU procurement rules. Next. And then finally, I said I'd come on to talk about some of the steps we're taking to encourage prime contractors to use SMEs more in the supply chain. I've mentioned payment already, so I won't dwell too much on that. We're encouraging prime contractors to open up supply chains, so to advertise subcontracting opportunities, again, on Contracts Finder. Some of our recent contracts, such as civil service learning, have included clauses where a percentage of the contract has to be openly competed. And we think that by doing that, you know, we benefit obviously because supply chains are being refreshed, more SMEs are hopefully coming onto contract, and prime contractors can benefit too because obviously they're benefiting from new ideas and innovations. And also we're looking at existing contracts to see where we might be able to break up exclusivity deals so that, you know, where they have been exclusively the area for the primes, if you like, whether there's anything we can do to open up those opportunities as well to give small businesses a chance to compete for that spend as well. I'll probably leave it there, and I'll now hand over to James to talk about specifically what Hewlett-Packard's doing.
Thank you very much, Ed. That was splendid. So kind of flipping things around a little bit now, I just want to talk a bit about how HP is playing its part in this programme. And I'll start with a statement that we try to avoid making because often it has a sort of negative set of connotations with it, but HP is the biggest supplier of IT products and services to the UK public sector market. And I think the point we really want to make about that is that we know that that's a privileged position, and it's one that we have to re-earn continuously through our support of not only what our departmental clients want to do, but what the centre of government wants to do as well. There's some of the client logos on there that we work with, which I won't dwell on, but the other part of this that I really want to point I want to make is that as well as being this big supplier to the public sector, we're actually a fairly significant economic force in the UK in our own right. Obviously not all of our clients in the UK are public sector. We sell to commercial organisations as well. We run services in the UK that deliver to customers outside of the UK. We run research and development here. And we spend a lot of money in our own supply chain anyway. About a third of our public sector business is already subcontracted to other suppliers. And in our UK supply chain, we think we've already got about 600 small and medium enterprises. And that's about, at the moment, about 14% of the by value of what we spend externally. About a year ago, our UK MD, Nick Wilson, made a commitment that in line with that strategy, if you like, that policy of supporting the centre of government's aspirations too, we would grow the amount of business that we place with SMEs by the end of this year. So we set ourselves a target of adding another 150 SME partners to our supply chain to bring that number up to 750. And increasing from what it was, which was about 10% to 15% by the end of this year, the value of goods and services that we bought from UK SMEs. Now, clearly, that's not the same as the government's 25% target, but this is a sort of manageable step along the way from HP's point of view, and we're on track to deliver the commitment we made. I think it's also worth saying that we're more than happy to acknowledge that there's a degree of self-interest in our support for this, not only in terms of obviously wanting to do the right thing as far as our public sector clients are concerned, but because it impacts HP in the wider economy. 99%, I think, according to BIS, of all private sector businesses are SMEs. They employ a huge proportion of the population. But more specifically from HP's point of view, they're very important just to the way that we work. So we think there are about 16,000 SME jobs in our distribution chain. That's our channel partners who sell and service and install HP equipment. And just to put that into context, that's only slightly smaller than the total number of people who work for HP directly in the UK. We've also done some research that suggests that about 3,000 of those jobs are wholly dependent on HP's presence here, either because they are specialists in HP's technology or because the companies that they work for are dedicated HP resellers. So you can understand that both from the point of view of selling into the wider economy and from the point of view of the way that our supply chain and our distribution chain is constructed, we need the SME market to be healthy. And given that 99.9% of all businesses are SMEs, a healthy SME economy is going to be a healthy economy overall. So we're as keen to see this happen as anyone in the government. I'll talk in a little while about a couple of case studies about how we've worked with SMEs to give you an illustration of the kind of commitments that we're making and the sort of support we can give. But I thought I'd talk a little bit to start with about the sort of general ways in which we think large suppliers like HP can help smaller companies with government. And the first of these is just simply access to the market. Very often, I think, and this has been fairly well publicised, SMEs have been put off selling to government because they think that it will take them a long time, because the kind of lead times are very long, because perhaps the contractual terms or the procurement processes are onerous. When they subcontract via HP, we can give them access to the government market without necessarily having to go through that process. Once we've got a prime contract with a government department, it's much easier for us to award work down the supply chain without going through the same sorts of bureaucratic processes. So an SME who's interested in selling to public sector, perhaps hasn't sold direct in the past, could put a toe in the water by working through us. And I'll talk in a second about an example of how that's helped one to break into the public sector market. Second is financial assistance. There's a number of ways in which we can leverage sort of HP's scale to help small companies. So for example, where we've worked with startups or companies who are at the very early stages of their development, and they've got a product or a service offering that we really want to use in support of a public sector client, we're quite happy to do things like forward order business from them, even without a commensurate commitment from our client, because it helps us to demonstrate the commitment to that piece of work and build the capability. So in one case, for example, we were able to forward order a year's worth of work for a small team from this particular organisation who then went out and recruited that team, knowing that they would have business for them for a year, whatever happened. And that helped them to kind of accelerate their growth. The next point really is one around sort of know-how and facilities. Over the years, through our government contracts, we've stood up a lot of infrastructure so that we can deliver to government. Data centres, ListX facilities, we've got connectivity into our sites and our data centres, which is quite time-consuming and expensive to install. And by working with small companies who perhaps wouldn't be able to implement those facilities themselves, they can piggyback on top of the investment that the government has made in HP and gain access to work with our clients through that route. And it's quite interesting, as part of the wider exhibition we've got here, we've got what we're calling our Sme Engage zone, where over the last couple of days we've been talking to companies who are interested in working with HP in the public sector. And one of the areas that's kind of consistently coming up here is, they might have a software offering that they want to sell to public sector, and being able to deliver it on top of our existing infrastructure through our data centres, perhaps in our cloud, is a way that they can do that without a load of additional cost. We also provide know-how to them, and I'll talk a little bit at the end of the presentation about some of the ways we're supporting small companies, both in general as HP kind of corporately and specifically in our public sector business. The last point is around kind of contractual support. Now, very often as a prime contractor, we have to enter into kind of quite punitive is not the right word, but the contracts we have are quite tightly drawn with the government around the services that they demand for us. And some of the provisions in there, particularly around things like limits of liability, are would be quite challenging for a smaller company to accept. Now, if we're working with a smaller company, we would not always look to pass down all of the terms, I guess is the point here. So it can often be easier for a small company to work with HP on probably a slightly more favourable contractual basis than they would get, or than certainly the one that we have with government. So again, it's a way of just easing entry into the market and de-risking some of those services from an SME's point of view. So I'll talk now about a couple of case studies, the first of which relates to some work that we did with a company called Emogen. Now, Emogen was a company that HP was working with in support of some work we did for one of our big clients, Vodafone, for whom we do a lot of web development. We run their online account servicing platform and their e-shop. And Emogen is a specialist in agile software development. They helped us to transform the way that we do the development for Vodafone and increase the turnover, the throughput of that software development team, particularly increasing the number of releases each year that Vodafone could make. When we knew that the DWP was interested in using agile software development, we were able to introduce Emogen, firstly as a subcontractor to us, to provide some advice and guidance to DWP, and they helped us there to change some of the processes we use for our delivery to the department. And then secondly, what happened after a little while was the department liked what Emogen were doing and suggested that rather than contracting through HP, they should contract directly with Emogen. So they kind of came out from underneath the prime contract that we have and contracted directly. Now, as a result of the work that they did there, which was their kind of first foray into public sector work, they then got themselves onto the G-Cloud framework. And when I looked at the statistics, I think from the end of April, Emogen was the single biggest supplier in terms of the volume of business that it had won through G-Cloud. So from not having had any public sector business at all, working with HP, working with the DWP, they're now a real success story and a poster boy for the G-Cloud program. And of course, we're very proud of the small role we had in helping them to access that market. Second one, which is a slightly different situation, relates to some of the work that we do for the Ministry of Defence. Now, some of you may know that we run a service called DII, the Defence Information Infrastructure, which is basically the intranet and the end-user computing platform for the MOD and all of the branches of the armed forces. And DII is quite a beast. It's installed not only in all of the military bases in the UK and abroad, we've just installed it in Kathmandu, for example, but it's also installed on 30 Royal Naval vessels. And one of the requirements for DII was that it had to be capable of working when the network connection back to the UK was lost. And they needed access to a set of data that to be available full-time through their SharePoint service. The very start of the contract, we identified a company called DigiLink, who were one of the only people we could find who had a capability to allow SharePoint to work offline. It was something that even Microsoft couldn't provide, but they were a startup at the time, and we desperately wanted to use them because we couldn't figure out another way of doing this. So we worked with them, we helped provide some finance for them, helped them commit to additional resources, we changed our payment terms, and remember this was 6 years ago, so it's before the government put in place the sort of prompt payment pledges. We changed our payment terms to help facilitate their working with us. And they've grown from there, they've got customers now, including people like Tesco's and some of the oil companies. And we've been working with them ever since, and you can see a little quote there from Ivor, who's the MD of DigiLink, about the value that they've seen in working with HP and how we've helped them grow their business. So those are just a couple of examples from the hundreds of SMEs that we work with. I just wanted to also kind of broaden out the discussion a little bit to talk about some of the other things that HP does to help small businesses. And again, it goes back to this point that really this is in our interest as much as it is the government's. So we've launched a program specifically to drive up that number of SMEs in our UK supply chain. We call it Sme Engage, and you can visit the Sme Engage zone at the conference. We've got a stand here today, as I said. This is about making it easier for SMEs to get on our registered supplier database, giving them access to the market in terms of having contact with the HP folk who sell into public sector and deliver to public sector. And as well, it kind of brings them into a community of other support that we provide. HP for a long time has been supporting an initiative called LIFE, which is the Learning Initiative for Entrepreneurs. This is a global program which allows small companies, startups, people interested in starting a business to get access to technology training, both face-to-face and online. And there's a network of HP Life Centres throughout the world, including in the UK, where people can access that. Some amazing stats about, I think, sort of 40,000 people have accessed those services since they were launched by HP. We've just launched this week the second running of our Smart Business Awards. This is an awards program specifically for small businesses. It gives small businesses the opportunity not only to showcase what they're doing, but the prizes, which are awarded both by HP and some of our other partners, are quite compelling as well. So they get access to a load of kit, they get access to trade missions that are run by some bigger companies, and access to mentoring and other forms of support. We're supporting business mentoring program. We've signed up for the Cabinet Office Procurement Pledge, which demands that large suppliers like HP basically implement the same measures to improve the way that we work with small businesses, access to the market, forward visibility of pipeline, use of contract finder, and so on, that departments are doing. And lastly, we've launched something called HP Business Answers, which is a LinkedIn group which now has about 8,000 members, which is a sort of self-help community for the SME sector, very active. We've grown that from about 4,000 to 8,000 over the last year and a half. So there's a whole basket of stuff that we're doing to kind of make good on the promise we've made here. So I'll just finish with a couple of thoughts, three thoughts in fact, about steps that we think departments might like to take to make sure they're using their spending power to help SMEs. And the first is, if you haven't done it already, ask your large suppliers what they're doing to help here. We're quite proud of our program of work. We know it could be better. I'm sure there are ways it could be improved, and we're interested to hear ideas about that. But from a department point of view, we think you should be asking all of your suppliers this question. Secondly, a little-known new piece of legislation which gained royal assent earlier this year, called the Public Services Social Value Act, which creates some interesting new provisions for departments and, in fact, public sector bodies of all sizes to look at and to consult on ways that they can add social and economic value to their procurement activities. It's not a very long act. In fact, the procurement policy note associated with it is longer than the act itself. But it is worth a look because it does create some interesting new avenues for government organisations. And lastly, and this is, I guess, the kind of classic plug that you'd expect in a presentation of this sort, buying from SMEs is often the best way of fulfilling a requirement, but it's certainly not always the best way of fulfilling a requirement. We think that larger contractors like HP can add value both to the contracting authority and to the smaller partner. So I guess what we're just saying is kind of keep an open mind about this stuff, because the government commitment around 25% is both direct and indirect spend, so that there is literally more than one way to skin this particular cat. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I was going to say in terms of the presentation. I'll shuffle back over to the table, and if anyone's got any questions, then Ed or I will be more than happy to take them. Thank you. Okay, anyone have a question? Yes, hello.
What's the government definition of a small medium enterprise? Is it on turnover or is it on employees?
It's both. So we use the EU definition of an SME, which is 250 employees or less, and then either a profit or a financial turnover figure as well, which I think is about 50 million euros. But it's the EU definition, and there's a definition of it on the Commission's website.
There are a couple of other dimensions, I think, to that, aren't there?
Yeah, it can't be
balance sheet size, and it can't be large of a bigger group. It can't be a subsidiary.
Yeah, it can't be parent owned. So we look at that. So it is, it has to be independent of larger companies.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Hi. Yeah, if you could say your name as well and where you're from, that would probably be.
John Curry from Ministry of Defence.
Hi.
DII.
Excellent.
I was interested, it applies to some of the stuff you said. As the main contractor, do you look to build a relationship with the SMEs and therefore make them part of your supply chain and a trusted partner of your supply chain, which I understand is a normal way of doing business? And how does that compare and contrast what Ed was saying about looking for refresh and open competition?
Yeah. So, as you'd expect, we have in HP, a company of our size, we 330,000 employees globally, so we're not far off the total size of the civil service, really. We have a procurement function, a global procurement function, that's responsible for managing that sort of process for us and adopting best practice. So although we're not bound by procurement rules that governments run, we do exactly the same sorts of things in terms of maintaining relationships, having approved supplier lists. We run competitive procurement activity to select suppliers and regularly kind of keep that, that process refreshed. I think it's probably fair to say that in the past, inclusion of smaller companies in our supply chains was probably done on a more ad hoc basis, in that it would be typically done by a pursuit team looking to bid for a particular contract. They would, as part of the solutioning activity, would reach out and perhaps use informal networks to find small companies that we could work with to meet a particular requirement. And then over the years, those companies might have, might have either carried on working with us, might have introduced themselves to other bits of our business and kind of spread through that. But it was a relatively unmanaged process. What we've been doing lately with the SME Engage program is trying to adopt a more focused way of doing this. And when we've talked to smaller companies, we know that there are, in the same way that they have historically had problems working with government, they've historically had problems working with us. I mean, some of our processes for becoming a registered supplier, for example, were quite bureaucratic. So the program has been trying to address those things. And really what we're doing at this event, I think, is probably an illustration of this. The thing that has probably worked less well so far, but we're now trying to improve, is providing contact for companies who have registered to be part of the program to their HP colleagues, because where the rubber hits the road here is in our solutioning teams and our business development teams and our delivery teams. And so it's they who need to be more aware of the SMEs that are out there, the partners that are out there, and need to bake them into the solutions. And just over the last couple of days, I mean, we've met with, I think we've had about 40 speed dating slots over the last couple of days with a variety of different companies. What's clear is that we found some that will be really helpful in terms of the government's savings agenda, will help us take cost out of existing delivery that we perhaps hadn't thought of. Some of them are value adding, and perhaps will create new solutions. So there's a whole range of different sorts of companies that we work with, and we're now working through how we can engage in the most appropriate way with them in our existing accounts. Sorry, that was a slightly long-winded answer, but I hope it's addressed the question you asked. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, please.
You said in your last answer that you explored ways of engaging SMEs or keeping developing that. Do you do any cross-work with small business research initiatives that is favoured by certainly the Treasury?
Yeah, we're aware of SBRI. I don't think it's something that we've particularly supported in the past. What we have found, and this has been something that's, for me personally, was quite a revelation, is that there's a lot of companies who work with us in our research area that typically get involved in that sort of stuff. Particularly through, so we have our labs in Bristol where we do about a quarter of HP's global primary R&D, and they independently have a network of companies, research partners that they work with. So we're looking at ways that we can bring those sorts of organisations more closely into our delivery teams as well. SBRI, I don't think is something we've got involved in, but we're certainly aware of it and watching it. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Have all pre-qualification criteria been dropped from the contracts under £100,000?
In central government, they have in the majority of departments, 15 out of 17. There are a couple of MOD and FCO instances, I think, where you still need to conduct some form, particularly for security reasons, of some of the more sensitive contracts. But for everything else, there should be no PQQ under £100,000, which is the EU threshold. If there is any suppliers in the room, please tell us, contact Mystery Shopper, and we will work with the government department or the public body concerned. That does extend to executive agencies and non-departmental public bodies as well.
Yes, sir.
What kind of knowledge sharing tools are going to be out there to help change behaviours, procurement behaviours within departments to actually move from traditional, maybe myopic focus of procurement to engaging with SMEs right at the start of the process?
Yeah. What sorts of what tools did you say, James? I missed one of the words in your question. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we have various forums and different tools. Each department's now got SME champions at ministerial and official level. The officials meet once every couple of months, so that's all, you know, the major 17 departments where we share best practice. We've got various bits of, you know, there are procurement policy notes on how to conduct pre-market engagement, you know, and busting the myth that you're not allowed to talk to suppliers. And we're also we're in the process of developing something called Solutions Exchange. We piloted this last year, and it's basically a mechanism for departments, if they're not sure what they want to buy but think the market might have some form of solution, they can put a challenge out there. And similarly, a supplier, if it thinks it has something that government should buy because it'll either help it be more efficient or deliver a good service, suppliers can come forward with, you know, I guess what effectively you might think as unsolicited proposals. So we've got a range of things to try and share best practice. Obviously, we had an event last week, the digital procurement event that MCO and Chloe Smith spoke at, and Stephen Kelly as well, where we got, you know, 100 or so procurers and SMEs in a room. So we've got various initiatives to do that. But I think you're right. Some of the things we still hear, procurers are still nervous about using pre-market engagement most effectively, and we've got some way to go, I think, to drive behaviour change.
If I could perhaps just just add to that, another tool that you might not be aware of that could be interesting in that regard is that Intellect, the IT Trade Association, has created on its website an area. I can't remember what they call it now, but it's kind of like the Solutions Exchange. So it's a set of data about all of the member companies that they have in their government group, which includes both the big boys like HP and their SME members as well. And it provides a sort of showcase of capability, particularly focused around the public sector market. So I appreciate that people need to be in the mindset to look for different sorts of suppliers to find that, but that's an additional source of information that you could use as well. Okay, any more questions? If not, I wonder if I could ask you a question. I'm intrigued to know, can large companies use the mystery shopper service?
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, we'll call it a halt there then. Thank you very much for coming to the session. Do please come and see us on the SME Engage Zone stand downstairs. We've got some sweets and pens, and you can also enter a prize draw and win some HP tablets. So anyone who fancies an Android tablet, come downstairs and leave us a business card. But thank you very much for coming to the session. I hope you enjoyed it.